friends, delegates, and fellow Americans.
It's July 2016.
I humbly and gratefully accept your nomination for the presidency of the United States.
Donald Trump is on stage at the Republican National Convention in Cleveland, Ohio.
Together, we will lead our party back to the White House.
And listening in the crowd is a friend, Nigel Farage.
And we will make America great again.
The great disruptor of British politics. Like Trump, he's riding high. Farage has just pulled off the great coup of his career, playing a pivotal, he would say, the decisive role in the greatest upset in recent political history, Brexit.
Let June the 23rd go down in our history as our Independence Day.
And look who just joined us. The British politician Nigel Farage, the guy who is credited with having the UK exit the EU.
The American TV networks all want a piece of Farage.
I mean, one of the things that happened was that London, a professional political class living in London, kind of had lost touch.
The next day, Farage leaves Cleveland and gets a flight to Chicago on his way back to the UK. But as he steps off the plane, there are federal agents waiting with handcuffs. For a moment, it looks like they're there for Farage himself, until they step forward to arrest a member of his entourage. Someone who, just 24 hours earlier, was strolling around Cleveland with him, without a care in the world. The man, with blonde, slick-back hair and a clean-shaven, chubby face, is 22-year-old George Swinfen Cottrell. But to those who know him, he's just Posh George. A decade on from that arrest and time in a US prison, Posh George is still the right-hand man, the most indispensable of all advisors to Nigel Farage, the man desperate to hold the keys to number 10. I'm Gabriel Pogrund. I run the Insight Investigations team at the Sunday Times, and together with my colleagues Venetia Menzies and Emanuele Midolo, we've spent the last few months trying to understand how a convicted fraudster with no official role in Reform UK has worked his way into the heart of British politics, standing by the man who could win the next election. From the Times and Sunday Times, this is Posh George, the criminal behind Farage. Episode 1, Meet George. So, before I became editor of Insight, the investigative unit here at the Sunday Times, I spent about a decade in and around Westminster as a political reporter. And it's funny, on reflection, the friendship between Farage and George Cottrell, Posh George, was one of those things I suppose Westminster just knew about. I think it was deemed to be old news, so self-evident it didn't need to be said out loud. Farage was also someone who revelled in his status as a rule breaker, one of the bad boys of Brexit. So maybe people assumed it was priced in. He had this friend, 30 years younger than him, with a checkered past. Who cares? In the Insight team, we didn't see it that way.
Hello, good morning. It is 8 o'clock.
The headlines you're waking up to. It has been so far a successful night for Reform UK. The party's gained more than 350 seats in the first result.
In May this year, Reform made massive gains in the local elections. And I remember when my phone started buzzing. It was a WhatsApp. He's here. Posh George is literally in the Reform spin room, the packed space within party headquarters, where MPs, officials and journalists would gather to watch the results and analyse what they really meant. I asked the person, well, why? For years, any time I'd asked anyone in Reform or before that the Brexit Party anything about Posh George, They told me he had no official party role. That was that. But now Farage and Cottrell were side by side in Reform HQ on a night of historic importance.
1,200 or so seats counted out of the 5,000 or so, and there's a clear winner. Here they are. It's Reform UK.
Then my contact said something interesting. Something people have said a lot about Farage and Posh George. Posh George, they said, was just around. I guess he is, just there. There to pull Farage's chair back as he sits down. There to flick his lighter or fetch him a pint. In the room when history is made. And it goes deeper than that. Farage depends on George for, well, everything. From the cigarettes he smokes, to the planes he flies, to the videos he posts.
It's a normal Reform evening. I'm DJing tonight, and it's, yes, Nigel Farage's Brexit Club Classics.
To, yes, the money that has ultimately supported his life and operation. Much of this has never been disclosed to the public. In fact, let me correct that. Most of it hasn't. And this story, the journey we've been on, is about far more than rules and regulations of Westminster. It's about friendship and the loneliness of leadership and, yes, judgment. Because well away from Parliament, there's another world of criminals, of crypto, of gambling, and which, through his relationship with Posh George, Farage is far closer to than one might think. So how does a criminal become the guy for Nigel Farage? George Cottrell was born in Gloucester on the 13th of October 1993, a small cathedral city surrounded by the west of England's rolling countryside. At the time John Major was Prime Minister,
if we can open Europe to all those nations right the way across Europe.
The Cold War had ended, Take That topped the charts. And in November that year, the Maastricht Treaty came into force.
The governments of the 12 reassembled here 2 months after the haggling of a summit which finally produced the treaty now ready for signature,
creating the modern European Union. Yet Posh George didn't grow up in a political family, nor by any stretch a normal one. His mother, Fiona, is an aristocrat, the daughter of the 3rd Baron Manton, a British soldier, landlord and racecourse owner. The young heiress grew up at the family's 8,000-acre seat in Houghton Hall, Yorkshire, and in her early 20s rebelled not just by becoming a model, but by posing naked for Penthouse, the men's magazine, which crowned her Pet of the Month. This posed something of a problem when she began a courtship with Prince Charles, the future king. The royals killed the match, and gossip columns said she'd become estranged from her family for a time. There were some other unusual boyfriends. One was a writer arrested and convicted of heroin smuggling. Another was a wealthy bobsledder and boat enthusiast 2 years her junior, whose name was Mark Swinfen Cottrell. Cottrell Sr. used to fly George's mother Fiona around his hometown of Gloucester by helicopter. It was, he said, the best way of beating the traffic. The pair quickly became engaged. More than a decade later, on George's birth certificate, his parents both completed the box marked occupation with the same answer. It read, of independent means. This was the world George Cottrell was born into, of land, of inherited money, and of question marks. You see, in many ways, Posh George is part of a generational story of people who are part of the establishment, but also, weirdly, outside of it. At a tender age, it seems, the family upped sticks and moved George and his older sister to Mustique. a microscopic private island in the Caribbean, beloved of billionaires and royalty. Quite why, and what George's parents actually did there, is hard to pin down. But, according to his own since-deleted CV, Posh George spent time at a local primary school before being sent home. First to the Elm School in Hertfordshire, which offers boarding to children from the age of 7, and then here.
So I've just parked the car and just turning the corner now, and right in front of me actually is this most stunning school. It's almost like a cathedral, Hogwarts and an Oxford college rolled into one. And this is Malvern College. And it's a place which over the generations has produced some pretty remarkable alumni, prime ministers, Nobel laureates, Chronicles of Narnia, C.S. Lewis, and Posh George. I've just stopped by one of the entrances. Malvern College is the side on my left. There's a little building in the background with these amazing turrets and gargoyles. Got a bird perched on top of one of the spires. So this is where Posh George was at school during his teenage years, and by all accounts it's the place where he made quite the name for himself.
Posh George's fellow students remember him given the impression of having a lot of money. There are stories of him sitting at the back of the class, leafing through the Financial Times. Curiously, he was more comfortable not in the company of English aristocrats, the school's traditional demographic, of which he was part, but the newer, flashier international money. 2 Nigerian boarders were among his closest friends. Until, that is, George left under a very dark cloud. Around the time of his 16th birthday, George was expelled after being involved in gambling while at school. One source told me it involved betting in Kruger Rand, gold bullion coins from South Africa. It was the end of his journey through the educational establishment. He was a teenager with no hope of university at a very sudden crossroads. So what did he do? Well, Posh George spent the next few years, as far as we can figure out, getting his real education. After briefly toying with the idea of joining the army, he headed to Mayfair. In the heart of clubland, where English, Arab and Russian money mingles in private members' clubs and hotel lobbies, Posh George swatted up. He became literate in international finance, private banking and offshore structures, apparently spending time with a man called Scott Young, a property mogul and fixer for Russian oligarchs. Now, my colleague Manu is in central London. He's just got off the tube at Green Park Station and is walking down Piccadilly on the opposite side to the Ritz. Before joining the Insight Investigations team, Manu spent half a decade covering property. So if you're trying to pin an asset to a person, he's your man.
So I just arrived at this street in Mayfair. It's off the beaten track, but it's actually quite busy. There's some workers, lots of cars, especially nice cars. There's a Porsche, there's a massive Bentley. I'm actually looking at a 4-story Georgian facade, quite imposing and looking slightly sinister. The shutters are closed. It doesn't look like anything is going on beyond the curtains. And the address might not mean anything to you right now. It's 44 Hertford Street. But it's here that Scott Young, the super fixer to the Russian oligarchs, had his offices.
And we understand Posh George worked here too. Almost 10 years ago, a website appeared detailing George's life. It had no named author, which I must say normally in journalism is a no for me. I obviously want to talk to people and verify things and get a feel for who they are before investigating their claims. But this website, beyond George's now deleted LinkedIn, is literally the only piece of information that exists purporting to provide any account of Posh George's early career. And it's detailed. It contains dates and documents, some of which we've independently verified. And it has this nugget that Posh George shared a building with the fixer for Russian oligarchs, Scott Young. When I put this to someone who knows George well, they stopped. They said this was the one part of his career, his whole life, which George Cottrell refuses to talk about. And this source said they understood George and Young had worked alongside each other. On the website, it says Scott Young took Posh George under his wing, giving him space on the same floor as his office, one you could only get to, by the way, by passing metal detectors on the ground floor. They worked separately, but also together, it says, Scott bringing Posh George into a connecting boardroom where cigarette smoke lingered and deals were made. George Cottrell disputes that he worked with Scott Young at this address. Not long after, Young was jailed for contempt of court. During divorce proceedings, he hid money from his wife in Monaco, the British Virgin Islands and Russia.
The judge has awarded you £20 million.
Okay? But can I just stop you there? Sure. It's called fraud and misrepresentation.
You're listening to audio of Scott Young on the phone with his then wife, which was broadcast in a BBC documentary in 2018.
Where would this money be magicked from?
I will get cracking on a couple of ventures.
During his time learning the ropes in the financial world, in George's words, he worked for private banks, investment managers, and high net worth individuals. So, when does he meet Nigel Farage?
Manny's saying something. Just say what you're saying.
Something to you.
I'm in the Insight office with my colleagues on this investigation, Venetia Menzies and Emanuele Midolo.
It is weird. I feel like we've spoken to a ridiculous number of people, none of whom can actually answer the question how they know each other. What do we actually think at the moment?
Well, we've spoken to many sources, and we know that George joined UKIP in 2010, which is the year he was expelled from school, and he must have been 16 or 17. But Posh George didn't meet Nigel Farage until 2014, when he was 21. And how exactly they were first introduced, we're not sure. But one of the clearest and simplest explanations, in my opinion, is just that he was introduced through his aristocratic uncle, Lord Hesketh.
Lord Hesketh. We haven't mentioned him yet, but he's George's uncle through marriage. In the 70s, he launched his own F.1 team with his own money, and even raced himself.
My name is Alexander Hesketh, and I'm the sponsor and constructor of the Hesketh 308 Grand Prix car.
He was a former Tory and he defected to UKIP around the same time, so that seems like a clear-cut way he could have got into Nigel's circle.
I have today with me our latest recruit, Lord Hesketh. You may have seen the coverage in the Daily Mail earlier this week. Lord H, welcome on board. What made you decide to join UKIP?
Well, I think Nigel, very simple.
And that's actually what Aaron Banks, the insurance millionaire and former UKIP donor, says in his book, his account of that whole time. He seems to infer that that's how Posh George came to know Nigel Farage. It was all through his uncle.
Which tallies with what we found, which is basically that by 2015, they were good friends.
I think that is the most efficient theory. And I guess they just seem to inhabit similar social worlds. Like, do you remember we found a copy of George Cottrell's deleted LinkedIn?
Yeah.
In that, there's references to lots of companies he's worked for. Some of them we think he probably never hung his hat at. But there was one, Maxim Corporate Finance, that was run by Murtash Azami, who many years later was the treasurer of Reform. So I guess in that world of Westminster, Mayfair, there just seems to be a fair amount of overlap. And I do wonder, life being messy, whether it's less straightforward than them having had one moment where they looked into each other's eyes. They might have just kind of entered each other's orbit in that kind of pre-Brexit moment.
We don't really know, do we?
But what we do know is that by the beginning of 2015, Posh George had been dispatched to Canvey Island in Essex to support this UKIP MP candidate, Jamie Huntman.
Kind of remarkable how early on he had the trust of UKIP hierarchy, which might point to the fact that it was a family connection. What do you actually feel is the likeliest?
I think the uncle connection is possibly the most straightforward, just like Venetia was saying. Uncle introduces him to this circle, but the truth is we may never know, right?
But we do know that by late 2015, just after David Cameron had called the EU referendum, Farage and Cottrell do know each other. Aged just 22, George was appointed the Deputy Treasurer of the UK Independence Party, or UKIP. It might sound surprising to hear of someone that young given that job, but UKIP at that time were an upstart, a pretty ramshackle, at times, candidly unprofessional entity. It was an anti-immigration party with one clear aim.
We want a trade deal with Europe. We want to be good neighbours with our European friends, but we desperately seek a referendum so that we can set this country free from political union.
And its leader, well, I think we know by now.
We want our country back.
Yeah, Nigel Farage. In 2016, Farage and Posh George were fully committed to the Brexit campaign. Mainstream politicians from around the world were warning it could be a disaster.
We're very supportive of Britain remaining a central member of the European Union. We'll reiterate that again this evening.
It's not fear I wish to promote, but truth. The economic development between our two countries.
Because our focus is in negotiating with a big bloc, the European Union, to get a trade agreement done. And UK is going to be in the back of the queue.
On the night of the vote itself, it seems to be on a knife edge. Posh George isn't concentrating on the result alone, because he thinks he's about to make a killing. Within a few weeks, he'll have won everything, lost it all, and ended up behind bars. While making this podcast series, we approached both George Cottrell and Nigel Farage. George Cottrell says his support of Mr. Farage is the result of friendship and shared political ideology, not any hope or expectation of receiving anything in return. Nigel Farage described Mr. Cottrell as a long-standing friend. Both deny any wrongdoing. You've been listening to Posh George, the criminal behind Farage, with me, Gabriel Pogrund, along with Venetia Menzies and Emanuele Midolo. The series is produced and executed by Will Rowe and Kate Lamble. The assistant producer is Colette Fountain. Sound design by Tiffany Dimmack. Theme title and original music by Adam Foran. And the head of podcasts at The Times is Dan Box.